Sometimes I still catch myself thinking about that day, that exact moment. It's like a record skipping, playing the same bizarre, disorienting scene over and over. My stomach still does that weird lurch when I remember it. I was in the middle of this massive meeting, right? The kind of meeting that could change everything for my career. 3 senior execs from our biggest potential client, and I'm there, pitching a $2.8 million deal, just pouring everything I had into it. My phone buzzes in my pocket, and I glance down, discreetly. It's from my wife, Chloe. The message starts, "Husband performance evaluation urgent." And then, it had a 5-page document attached. My blood ran cold. The subject line alone was enough to make me feel sick, but I couldn't do anything. I was mid-sentence, talking about projected ROI and market penetration. So, I just silenced the phone, pushed it deep into my pocket, and somehow, I kept talking. The presentation went great, actually. We shook hands, they promised an answer by Friday, and I walked out feeling high. Like I'd just nailed something truly huge. Then I got to my car, and everything just evaporated. The excitement, the adrenaline, all of it. I pulled up the message, and there it was. Formatted like a real HR review. Categories, scores out of 10, bullet points detailing my failures as a husband. Financial contribution, 6 out of 10. Because I was meeting baseline expectations, apparently, but showing no growth initiative. Emotional availability, a 4. Because I worked too much. Romance, a 3. Because I'd forgotten our 3-month anniversary, which, honestly, stung a bit because I genuinely had. But then, at the bottom, in bold red text, it just said, "You have 7 days to prove you're worth staying married to. Don't disappoint me again." I just sat there, phone in my hand, staring at the screen. 10 minutes? 15? I don't know. I wasn't angry. Not yet. I was just profoundly, utterly confused. When had my marriage become a job I could get fired from? To understand any of this, you have to go back a little. My name's Mark, I'm 32. I'm a regional sales manager for a tech company, and I make good money, about $140,000 a year, plus bonuses. I own my house outright, bought it as a foreclosure 6 years ago, spent 2 years fixing it up myself. I met Chloe about 10 months before this whole evaluation thing. It was at my cousin's wedding. She was a bridesmaid, gorgeous, funny, charming. We just clicked. She was 24, working as a marketing coordinator, seemed ambitious. We dated for 5 months, got engaged, married 3 months later. It all happened pretty fast, looking back. And honestly, for a while, everything felt fine. Until about 3 weeks after the wedding. That's when she quit her job. She told me she wanted to focus on being a wife, making our home perfect, supporting my career so I could advance faster. It sounded sweet. Like she really wanted to invest in us. I remember thinking, okay, figuring she was burned out and needed a break. But then the spending started. Before we got married, Chloe was pretty normal about money. She'd split checks, buy her own things, never expected me to cover everything. After the wedding, it was like a switch flipped. Suddenly, she was ordering hundreds of dollars worth of skincare products, signing up for a boutique gym that cost $200 a month, getting her hair done every 3 weeks at some fancy salon downtown. I'm not cheap. I've never been cheap. But I started noticing, every single week, there was another charge on our joint account for something she needed. A few months in, I tried to bring it up gently. Asked if maybe we could just budget a little better. She looked at me like I'd just insulted her entire existence. "I gave up my career for you," she said. "The least you can do is make sure I'm taken care of." It felt incredibly manipulative, even then, but I just didn't have the energy to fight about it. So, I let it go. I told myself we'd work it out eventually. Fast forward to today, to that absolutely insane message in my car. And it finally hit me. I'd been ignoring so many red flags because I wanted to believe I'd made the right choice marrying her. I drove home in silence, rehearsing every possible response in my head. Was I overreacting? Or was this genuinely as crazy as it felt? When I walked in, Chloe was on the couch, watching some reality show. She looked up at me with this almost expectant smile, like she was waiting for me to apologize for something. I didn't say anything at first. Just walked past her into the kitchen, poured myself a glass of water. She followed me. "Did you get my message?" she asked, a little too casually. "Yeah, I got it," I said. Right in the middle of the most important meeting of my career. She didn't even flinch. "Good. So, you understand? We need to have a serious conversation about our future." Like she was a manager calling an underperforming employee into her office. I looked at her. "Are you serious about this whole 7-day evaluation thing?" She nodded. "Completely serious, Mark. I've been unhappy for a while, and I need to see real change, or I don't think this is going to work." Her tone was so calm, so casual. Like she was talking about returning a sweater that didn't fit right. I just stood there, looking at her, really looking at her. And I saw someone I didn't recognize anymore. This wasn't the woman I married. Or maybe it was, and I was just too distracted to notice before. I took a deep breath, and I said something I'd been thinking about for weeks, but never had the courage to verbalize. "If you're evaluating me," I said, "then I'm evaluating you, too. Consider this a mutual review period." Her face went blank for a second. It was almost funny, she clearly hadn't expected me to push back. Then she let out this short, dismissive laugh. "Fine, evaluate away," she said. "I'm sure you'll realize pretty quickly that you're lucky to have me." She turned and walked back to the couch, unpaused her show. I went upstairs to my office and closed the door. I sat down at my desk, opened my laptop. I wasn't really sure what I was doing yet, but I knew, definitively, that something fundamental had just changed. I pulled up our joint bank account and started scrolling through months of transactions. And what I found, it just made my blood run cold. Thousands. Thousands of dollars spent on things that had nothing to do with running a household. Clothes, fancy restaurants, subscriptions to services I'd never even heard of. And the kicker? Her contribution to any of it was exactly zero. She hadn't worked, hadn't brought in any income, hadn't even really managed the house because we still ordered takeout 4 times a week, and I was the one doing most of the cleaning. I closed the laptop, leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling. And for the first time in months, I felt something other than confusion. I felt clarity. If Chloe wanted to evaluate whether I was worth keeping, then I was absolutely going to evaluate whether this marriage was worth keeping. And I had a feeling I already knew what the answer was going to be. Day 2 of her evaluation. I woke up at 6, like always. Showered, dressed for work. When I came downstairs, Chloe was still asleep in our bedroom, door closed. Not unusual. She rarely gets up before 10:30. But today, it just hit different. Because I was actively paying attention to what she actually did with her time. I made coffee, checked emails. Before I left for the office, I did something I'd never done. I took my laptop with me instead of leaving it on my desk at home. I also called my brother, Daniel. Asked him if he could swing by later to pick up some tools I'd borrowed. Really, I was giving him a spare key and asking him to keep an eye on things, just in case. He agreed, didn't ask too many questions. Daniel's always been good like that. On my lunch break, I logged into our joint account from my office. Started building a spreadsheet. Every transaction since she quit her job, organized by category. It took me almost 2 hours, but by the end, I had a complete financial picture of our marriage. And it was worse than I'd imagined. Chloe had spent $9,200 in the 4 months since she stopped working. That's clothes, beauty treatments, restaurants with her friends, subscription boxes, online shopping, boutique fitness classes, a dozen other things that had nothing to do with our household. Her contribution to our joint expenses, groceries, utilities, mortgage, anything that actually kept our life running, was zero. I sat there, staring at the numbers, feeling like such an idiot for not catching this sooner. But I was busy. I was working, trying to build a future, and I trusted her to be reasonable. That trust was clearly misplaced. I created a new checking account in my name only, transferred most of my money into it, leaving just enough in the joint account to cover the bills I knew were coming due this month. Then I called my buddy Ben, who's a family lawyer. Asked him if he had time for a drink after work. We met at a bar near his office. Around 7. I laid out the whole situation. The performance review, the spending, the entitlement, all of it. Ben listened without interrupting. When I was done, he was quiet for a minute. Then he said what I was describing sounded like financial manipulation. That's someone who contributes nothing but demands everything, and then threatens to leave if you don't meet their standards, is controlling you. He told me I needed to document everything, screenshots, save messages, keep records of all spending. Because if this went where he thought it was going, I'd need proof. And then he told me something I wasn't expecting. He said Chloe had been talking about me to mutual friends for months. Complaining that I was cheap, that I didn't appreciate her, that she could have done better. Ben said he hadn't wanted to tell me before, thought maybe it was just normal marriage venting. But combined with everything else, it painted a pretty clear picture. Someone who'd been checked out of this relationship for a while. I drove home feeling like I'd just been punched in the stomach. Not because I was heartbroken. I was angry. Angry at myself for missing all the signs. When I got there, Chloe was in the living room with her friend Olivia. They were drinking wine, watching something on Netflix. They both looked up when I walked in. Olivia left pretty quickly, said she had to get home. I could tell from the look on her face they'd been talking about me. Once she was gone, I sat down across from Chloe. I asked her directly if she'd been complaining about me to our friends. She got defensive immediately. Said I was being paranoid, that she was allowed to talk to her friends about her feelings. That's fine, I told her, but maybe don't post about it on Instagram where 3,000 people can see it. Her face went pale. What are you talking about? She asked. I pulled up my phone and showed her the screenshots I'd taken during lunch. She'd posted a story yesterday about being married to someone who doesn't understand that maintaining yourself costs money. And another one this morning about cheap men who expect their wives to look expensive on a Walmart budget. She tried to laugh it off, said she was just venting, didn't think I'd see it. I pointed out that it was public. Anyone, including my coworkers and family, could see it. That she was humiliating me online while living off my income. She got quiet. And then she said something that genuinely shocked me. Maybe if you made more money, I wouldn't have to complain. I just stared at her. I make $140,000 a year. We have no debt except the mortgage, which is tiny. And she spends money like we're pulling in $500,000. I took a deep breath. From now on, the joint account is for household expenses only. My paycheck goes into a separate account. If you need money for personal things, you can get a job. Like every other adult. She just lost it. Started yelling about how I was trying to control her, how I promised to take care of her, how this wasn't what she signed up for. I stayed calm. I told her I didn't sign up to be an ATM with a wedding ring, that marriage is supposed to be a partnership. And right now, I was the only one contributing anything. She stormed off to the bedroom and slammed the door. I spent the rest of the night in my office, going through more bank statements, screenshotting her social media posts. Day 3. I worked from home. And I watched. I watched what Chloe actually did all day. She woke up at 11. Made herself breakfast. Spent 2 hours on her phone. Went to a yoga class. Came home. Showered. Then sat on the couch scrolling through shopping apps until I was done working. She didn't clean anything. Didn't cook. Didn't do laundry. Didn't even take out the trash. When I asked her what she did today, she said she was busy and seemed genuinely offended that I was questioning her. That evening, I got a text from Ben. He'd heard from another friend that Chloe was telling people she was keeping her options open. Which, apparently, is code for she's already thinking about her next relationship before this one is even over. I didn't confront her about it yet. I was still gathering information, still building my case. But internally, I'd already made my decision. Day 4. I met with the lawyer Ben recommended, a woman named Sarah. She specialized in divorce cases. I walked her through everything. She took notes, asked questions about assets and timelines. She told me that if we moved forward, I'd want to act fast, before Chloe figured out what was happening and started hiding things or making accusations. I left her office with a folder full of paperwork and a retainer agreement. On my drive home, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. I felt like I was back in control of my own life. When I walked through the door that night, Chloe was waiting for me. Arms crossed. I knew from her expression that she'd figured out something had changed. She just didn't know what yet. Day 5. I made phone calls from my office at work. The kind of calls you make when you're systematically removing someone from your life. First, I called our phone carrier. Moved Chloe's line to a separate account under her name. She could keep the number, but she'd have to pay for it herself starting next month. Then, our car insurance company. Removed her from my policy. She was listed as a driver on my car, but it's titled in my name only, so legally, I could do it. I updated all my beneficiary information on my life insurance and retirement accounts, changing everything from Chloe to my brother Daniel. And I sent an email to HR at work doing the same thing with my health insurance and 401k. The whole process took about 3 hours. By the time I was done, I felt lighter. Like I'd been carrying something heavy, and I'd finally put it down. I left work early and drove straight to Sarah's office. I signed the divorce petition and wrote a check for her retainer. She told me the papers would be ready to serve by tomorrow and asked if I wanted to be there when it happened. I told her no, just have the process server go to the house in the morning when I was at work. That evening, I came home. Chloe was in the kitchen, making herself a smoothie. She asked me if I'd thought about her evaluation and what changes I was planning to make. I looked at her. Standing there in her expensive workout clothes, with her fresh manicure, holding a $400 blender. I almost laughed at the absurdity of it all. I told her I'd thought about it a lot. And I'd have an answer for her tomorrow. She smiled, like she'd already won, and went back to her smoothie. Day 6. That's when everything fell apart for her. I went to work like normal. Around 10 in the morning, I got a text from my neighbor Paul, with a photo attached. He's the retired guy 2 doors down who I helped with his fence last summer. The photo showed Chloe screaming at a process server on our front porch. Apparently, she didn't take the divorce papers well. My phone started blowing up with calls and texts from her, but I ignored all of them. I was in back-to-back meetings all day, and I genuinely didn't have time for her drama. Around 3 in the afternoon, Daniel called. Told me I needed to come home. That Chloe's mother, Carol, had shown up at the house, and they were both losing their minds. I told him I'd be there in 30 minutes and I left work early for the second day in a row. When I pulled into my driveway, there was a car I didn't recognize parked on the street. I could hear yelling from inside the house before I even opened the door. Chloe and her mother, Carol, were both in the living room. Chloe was crying. Carol was pacing back and forth, talking on her phone. When I walked in, they both turned to look at me, like I was the villain in their story. Carol hung up and immediately started in on me. How I was ruining her daughter's life, abandoning my responsibilities, how no real man would treat his wife this way. I let her finish. Then I very calmly told her that her daughter hadn't worked in 4 months, had spent more than $9,000 of my money on personal luxuries, publicly humiliated me on social media, and gave me a literal performance review like I was her employee. Carol looked at Chloe for confirmation. Chloe just stood there crying, not denying any of it. I told them both that I was done with this conversation and that they needed to leave. Carol said Chloe lived there and didn't have to go anywhere. So, I pulled out my phone and showed them the 30-day notice to vacate that Sarah had drafted. Chloe had 30 days to find somewhere else to live. After that, I could pursue formal eviction if necessary. Carol's face went red, and she started yelling again, calling me every name she could think of. Chloe just crumpled onto the couch, sobbing. I went upstairs to my office and locked the door. I could hear them downstairs for another hour before they finally left. Around 8 that night, my doorbell rang. I looked through the window. Chloe was standing there with 2 of her friends. I opened the door, and before I could say anything, she pushed past me into the house. Her friends followed. Suddenly, I had 3 women in my living room staging what I guess was supposed to be an intervention. Chloe was calmer now. Not crying anymore. She told me she overreacted this morning, that she was shocked and hurt, but she was ready to talk rationally now. She said she knew she made mistakes, but so did I. That marriage was about compromise, that we could work through this if I just canceled the divorce and gave her another chance. Her friends nodded along, like this was a reasonable request, like the last 4 months hadn't happened. I stood there, listening to her talk. And I realized, she still didn't get it. She still thought this was negotiable, that she could manipulate her way back into the life she had. When she finally stopped talking, I looked at her, and I said the only thing that needed to be said. You had 7 days, I told her. And you wasted all of them. Her face changed. The fake calm disappeared. She started yelling again about how I never loved her, how I used her, how she gave up everything for me. I didn't argue. There was no point. I just told her and her friends to leave, and that if they didn't, I'd call the police. They left, but not before Chloe told me I was going to regret this, that she'd take me for everything I had, that I'd end up alone and miserable. I closed the door behind them and changed all the locks that night. I'd ordered new hardware online 2 days ago, and it had arrived this morning. Day 7. It was quiet. Chloe didn't come by, didn't call, didn't text. I went to work, came home, and spent the evening packing up her belongings into boxes that I'd have delivered to wherever she ended up. I found clothes with tags still on them, shoes she wore once, beauty products that cost more than my weekly grocery budget. Every box I packed felt like evidence of how blind I'd been. How I let someone take advantage of me because I wanted to believe I'd made the right choice. That night, I slept better than I had in months. Because I knew it was finally over. I knew that I was getting my life back. And I knew that Chloe was about to learn a very expensive lesson about what happens when you mistake someone's patience for weakness. 6 months later, the divorce was finalized. I'm sitting in my living room with a cup of coffee, thinking about how different my life looks now. Chloe tried to fight for alimony, but Sarah explained her lawyer couldn't make a case when she'd only been unemployed for 4 months of our 8-month marriage and had no dependents. Last I heard from Ben, she's working retail at a mall across town, living with 2 roommates in a small apartment, and dealing with credit card debt from trying to maintain her lifestyle after I cut her off. I don't take any pleasure in her struggles, but I also don't feel guilty about them. She made her choices, and these are the consequences. As for me, that $2.8 million contract? It got approved 3 weeks after the divorce was filed. Came with a promotion and a significant raise. I've been seeing someone new for about 2 months now, a veterinarian named Emily. She owns her own practice. And on our first date, she insisted on splitting the bill. She's 30, financially independent. And when I told her about Chloe, she said something that stuck with me. She said that anyone who makes you prove your worth doesn't understand what partnership means. I still think about that performance review sometimes. How insulting and dehumanizing it was to have my value as a husband reduced to scores and metrics. But I also think about how it was the wake-up call I needed. Without that moment of clarity, I might have stayed in that marriage for years, slowly losing myself while Chloe drained my bank account and my self-respect. She wanted to evaluate my worth, and in doing so, she revealed her own. Or rather, the complete absence of it. What would you have done if you got that message?